Hey, welcome back to the channel and our read-along book club of Steven Erikson's Gardens of the Moon. We are on episode 6, chapter 7, because this was a normal length chapter in this book, about an hour for me to get through, and there were some interesting things that happened within. So I feel like there's a little bit of plot restraint to a degree in this, which I am very proud of Erikson for doing, because you'll notice that, or you'll know that one of my complaints has been that we get too much information from every single perspective, and so there's a lack of mystery there, at least for me. But in this one, there's some stuff about Rallick and Murillo that are interesting because not everything is revealed. We know they're up to something. We don't quite know what it is yet. And obviously, Crocus is involved with his little spinning coin. So I will stop jabbering about my thoughts and let's move into the actual book here, or the actual chapter. So we are on chapter 7. We are greeted with a very short passage, right? This is not what we're used to, not whatsoever. It says, I see a man crouched in a fire who leaves me cold and wondering what he is doing here so boldly, crouched in my pyre. Gadrobi Epitaph, Anonymous, and we know that this links directly to the beginning, the first scene of chapter 7, when we have our dear Krupa. I was calling him Krupp last time, and I realized after listening to the audiobook that at least the narrator pronounces his name Krupa. So I will continue to call him Krupa like a great King Koopa Troopa. Sorry, terrible Mario joke. Anyway, let us begin. So this time, Krupa's dream took him out through Marsh Gate along South Road, then left onto Cutter Lake Road. And he says, the coin has entered a child's possession, though he knows it not. Fortunate that Krupa's perfectly round body is an example of perfect symmetry. I love that line. I really enjoy this character. He doesn't feel real, though. He feels like a cartoon character in a way, but I'm buying it for some reason. I'm not sure why that is. Probably because a lot of the characters in this book are sort of what you'd expect in their archetypal fashion, or whatever profession they may be in. They seem to be what you'd expect. However, this guy, he's just so hard to figure out. We know he's magical, right? He's a mage of some kind. He can walk in his dreams, apparently, because here we find him in his dreams yet again. And who does he meet? He meets his sharp eyes could make out a single figure seated there, seemingly holding its hands in the flames, and these long, sinuous fingers are spreading wide. Strangers wander through them, the figure said, in a thin, oddly accented voice. Such as I. Have you summoned me then? It has been a long time since I walked on soil. And Krupa is taken aback. He just wants to sit here. He wants to warm his hands. He's in his dream, right? He doesn't know what the hell's going on. But he continues with, I seek sensation once again, it said, but my hands feel nothing. To be worshipped is to share the supplicant's pain. I fear my followers are no more. And Krupa, for once, was silent. But then he speaks, right? We expect him to, of course. Krupa's not going to stay quiet for too long. Krupa thinks you are an elder god. Have you a name? And we find out this person's name, elder god or not, is Cruel. I don't know. Malazan experts, let me know, or I should probably just look it up on the Wikipedia, right? And Krupp asks him, what are you doing here? How did you get in my dream? And Cruel continues, blood has been spilled behind the walls of this glowing city, Krupa, upon stone once holy in my name. This is new to me. Once I reigned in the minds of many mortals, and they fed me well with blood and split bones. Long before the first towers of stone rose to mortal whims, I walked among hunters. I believe I am here to await one who will be awakened, one I have known before, long ago. And he continues to tell Krupa to seek Talan Emas, who will lead the woman. They are awakeners. I must prepare for battle, I think. One I will lose. And then Krupa comes to a realization when he says, you are being used. I will lose a battle, but I will not die. And this elder god, he leaves this fire, he leaves Krupa alone, and Krupa says, in the hands of a child, he muttered. This night, Krupa is truly alone in the world. Alone. So what does any of this mean? I have no idea, and I love it. I love not knowing this stuff, right? Because again, the mystery is important, so thank you for including mystery in this scene. Let us move on to the next scene break, and we find our Circle Breaker. So an hour before dawn, Circle Breaker was relieved of his vigil at Despot's Butterbecan. This night none had come to rendezvous beneath the gate. Lightning played among the jagged peaks of Talon Mountains to the north as the man walked in solitude down the winding charms of Anise Street in the Spice Quarter. Ahead and below glittered the lakefront, the merchant trader ships from distant Kalos, Ellengarth, and Kepler's Spite, hunched dark and gloaming between gloaming, that's a cool word, between gaslit stone piers. So really, we have this guy, we have this circle breaker, the spy, and he's contemplating. I really enjoy this scene because it really reminds me of, again, scenes of minor characters where we get some backstory. He's thinking about what brought him here, what is he doing with his life, all of these thoughts and reflection really about everything, exemplified by this highlight. Bright were the memories of his childhood at these docks, to which he had been ever drawn by the allure of the strange traders as they swung into their berths like weary and weathered heroes returned from some elements. And he's asking himself, is it only the young who know desperation, he wonders, as he moved to sit on the pier's stone sea wall. We get a little bit more backstory here about him. Never reach too far, he thinks. A simple lesson of life he had learned long ago on the burning deck of a corsair, its belly filling with the sea as it drifted outside the pinnacle fortifications of a city named Broken Jaw. And then we're brought back to the present, really, with this next thought. So the deadlock that had come with the assassination of Councilman Lim still held within those walls. Turban Orr, his victory on the voting floor snatched from his hands in the last moment, now flung his hounds down every trail, seeking the spies he was convinced had infiltrated his nest. The councilman was no fool, and too late to concern himself about reaching too far. Since the day the Eel's agent had come to him, the man's future was sealed. To some, it would be called treason. And he sat on the pier awaiting the Eel's agent, and he would deliver into the man's hands a message for the eel. But then he's thinking about, I can just not do this, right? In fact, he says, so easy, so easy. And with a slow, deliberate movements, the man tore up the scroll. He let the ragged pieces drift down, scattering into the gloom of the lake-shadowed shore. The rising waves swept them outward to dot the turgid waves like flecks of ash. And of course, what does he hear? What does he think he hears? He thought he heard a coin spinning. It seemed a sad sound. And 4 streets ahead, his single room waited on the second floor of a decaying tenement, gray and silent with the coming dawn, its thin, warped door latched and locked. In that room he allowed no place for memories, nothing to mark him in a wizard's eye or tell the sharp-witted spy hunter details of his life. In that room he remained anonymous even to himself. Beautiful, beautiful scene. I love that. I would dare say this is probably one of my favorite scenes I've read so far in this book, because in storytelling you are usually taught to focus on only the characters who matter, right? If we have these side characters that don't really contribute much in terms of the overall plot, then take them out, omit them completely, right? We want to focus on the key players. But what Erikson does well here, and I think it really works in epic fantasy like this, because, you know, us as readers who are reading epic fantasy, we understand these are longer volumes, right? We let them breathe. We like them to breathe, right? They're these massive tomes that really encompass what we imagine a massive tome in these worlds would be like. And so what's great about this is it affords you the time to spend on these minor characters. And I feel for this guy already, right? In this very short scene, I feel for him, and dare say I feel for him more so than many of our main players in this. And to me, that speaks volumes. So I know Steven Erikson has the chops. He has the chops to make me care, because I see that here. I just hope he brings it to the major players. So again, hats off to Mr. Erikson for this beautiful short scene with this spy, this unnamed person. But we can't, I will not gush about this scene for the entirety of this video. Let us move on. So we are back to Lady Simtal. So the Lady Simtal paced. These last few days, too much of her hard-won gold had been spent smoothing the waters. That damn bitch of Limbs had not let grief get in the way of her greed. Barely 2 days shrouded in black, and then out on the courts, hanging on that fat Murillo's arm, smug as a tart at a ball. So we learn later that Murillo's hanging out with Turban's lady, and Turban is hanging out with Lady Simtal, right? In fact, lying in her bed. Right here. She stopped pacing and faced the man sprawled on her bed. So you've learned nothing. A hint of contempt had slipped into her tone, and she wondered if he'd caught it. And there he is, Councilman Turban Orr, hanging out on this lady's bed. And he says, I've told you all this. There's no knowing where that poison quarrel came from, Simtal. Hood's breath poisoned. What assassin uses poison these days? Vorkan's got them so studded with magic, everything else is obsolete. So that's an interesting thing to note. We do know that magic is very prevalent in this world, and it is even into assassination, right? So I think in classic fantasy, we think of assassins having poison darts or quarrels in this case. But in this case, it's different, right? They are mostly magic, so it's a bit of an anomaly. It's like I said, Orr continued. Lem was involved in more than one delicate venture. The assassination's probably unconnected with yours. It could have been anyone's balcony. It just happened to be yours. So they are arguing about this situation. She's worried about herself. He's blowing it off like no big deal. It could have been anybody's. But then she is asking him to kill her husband. My beloved dispossessed, you idiot. He hasn't sobered up since you threw him out on his arse. And old Turban Orr, he's putting his pants on, right? He's done with this. The debate rages on at Majesty Hall. My influence is required. I believe the proclamation of neutrality to the Malazans will go through, perhaps tomorrow or the next day. This is something we learned about in the last chapter, and she laughs harshly. Neutrality? You're beginning to believe your own propaganda. And he serves up some cold words when he says, all that interests you is you. Save the righteous citizen awful for your fawns, Simtal. And she brings the conversation back to her husband. You should kill him and be done with it. And then she utters some true words. The easiest thing to break is a man's heart, Simtal said with a private smile. She lay down on the bed, stretching her arms and arching her back. She said, what about Moonspawn? It's still just hanging there. She knows what she's doing because, gazing down at her, his eyes traveling along her body, the councilman replied distractedly, we've yet to work out a way to get a message up there. We've sent a tent in its shadow and stationed representatives in it, but that mysterious lord just ignores us. She says, maybe he's dead. Maybe the moon's just sitting there because there's nobody left alive inside. Have you thought of that, dear councilman? And he changes the subject again about seeing her tonight. And she reminds him, yet again, I want him killed. And finally he leaves, and lying on her bed, Lady Simtal's side, her thoughts shifted to a certain dandy, whose loss to a certain widow would be a most delicious coup. So here we are with our famous fop, Murillo. He is sipping spice wine. The details are sketchy, he said, making a face as the fiery alcohol stung his lips. So he is grooming this lady, Turban Orr's wife. He's trying to get some tickets to this event. And they're up on this balcony, observing the city. The wolf goddess of winter dies her seasonal death, on a carpet of white, no less. And in a week's time, the Getterone fate fills the streets with flowers, soon to clog gutters and block drains throughout the city. Lady Simtal's version held that Councilman Lim had come in person to acknowledge her formal invitation. And this is when he's prying. Of course, surely your house has been invited. Oh, yes, and you? Alas, no, Murillo said, smiling. But the woman fell silent, her eyelids lowering in thought. She's thinking what he's thinking, but in a different way. As his gaze wandered aimlessly along Morrel's street of jewels, he stiffened slightly, eyes widening as they focused on a figure standing in a doorway opposite him. And we know who this gentleman is. And he shifted in his seat, dropping his left hand past the stone railing out of the woman's sight. Then he jerked it repeatedly, glaring down at the figure. It is Ralek Nom Nom Noms. His smile broadened. Idiot! The man's face, his hands, his walk, his eyes all said one thing, killer. Hell, even his wardrobe had all the warmth and vitality of an executioner's uniform. Which made this whole thing rather odd, that such a complex scheme could have been born from the assassin's rigidly geometric brain. Still, whatever its origins, it was pure genius. So again, we don't really know what this is, and I will give credit because that's what I want. That's exactly what I want in books. I don't want to know exactly every detail. Now, we do have some flip-flop repeating information we already know through different POVs. That's okay. I mean, I'm not a fan of that stuff, but maybe Erikson felt it was necessary. But the key point is we don't know exactly what the hell they're planning. And Murillo continues his game. It's a large state, isn't it? Oh, Lady Simtal's? Indeed, fraught with rooms. I would expect a good as many of the servants' quarters, though lacking in the simplest needs of luxury, will remain empty for much of the night. Ralek's plan had centered on this very moment and its consequence. Still, adultery had one drawback. Murillo had no desire to meet this woman's husband on the dueling piste. But I would love to attend this ladies' festival on one condition. Of course, the woman replied, suddenly coy. That would be unseemly. How many invitations do you require? 2, he said. Best that I be seen with a companion. Yes, it's best. And he bids the lady farewell. Until the eve, Lady Orr. Until then, the councilwoman's wife answered, seeming already to lose interest in him. Goodbye. Murillo bowed again, then left the balcony. Among the crowded tables, more than a few noblewomen's heavy-lidded eyes watched him leave. Now we are down on the street with our buddy Rallick Nom Nom Nom. Morrel's street of jewels ended at Sickle Gate. Rallick felt the wide eyes of the two guards beside the ramp following him as he passed through the passage between the massive stones of third-tier wall. But the guards did nothing. Giving the appearance of being a murderer wasn't the same as being one in truth. In the Empire, assassin guilds were illegal, and those of the trade who were deemed worthy were enlisted into the secret ranks of the Claw. So he's imagining this when Malazan takes over. It would be a different world when the Empire came, and Rallick wasn't sure he wanted to be part of it. And this is when we are sort of reinforcing, by repetition, Murillo's problem about dueling Turban Orr. So his first thought was that Murillo feared the possibility of a duel with Turban Orr. He was pondering the implications when his gaze found a familiar face among the street's crowd. And who is that man? Who is that familiar face? But it is Crocus. So beneath the mid-morning's blue and silver hue, Crocus walked along lakefront streets surrounded by the bedlam of merchants and shoppers. Yet he never before understood the most subtle and hurtful insult his thefts delivered, the invasion of and violation of privacy again and again. In his dreamy wanderings, both day and night, the vision of the young woman asleep in her bed returned to him. So this kind of caught me off guard because it doesn't seem genuine to me. This does not seem like something that he would all of a sudden come to realize. But playing devil's advocate, he's a young man. He's only 17. He's a little bit immature. He doesn't know the ways of the world. So maybe he has a certain moral compass, let's say, that is driving him to this direction, that is making him have this somewhat ignorant, misinformed impression. But we really know what it's about, right? He likes this lady. He's smitten, as somebody says later in this chapter. And this next line really sort of reinforces what I was talking about just a second ago. So for Crocus, his crime against her was tantamount to rape, to have so boldly shattered her world. I didn't get that, right? I didn't get that. I'm not sure why he is coming to this conclusion so early. Again, it could be the ignorance of youth. I have no idea, but let's just say this really kind of caught me off guard. And maybe it's because I didn't realize he was falling in love with her and there was a slow devolution of his thoughts and being hard on himself, like essentially equating him stealing this turban out of her room to rape. Feel like it could work from a character standpoint because he is a young, ignorant man, but it just still caught me off guard. So he had traveled half the length of the alley when a hand closed around his mouth from behind and a dagger sharp point pressed against his side. Rallick Nom 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 withdrew his dagger and stepped back, a severe frown marring his brow. Good, the assassin said. He came close. Listen carefully, Crocus. You'll not try Orr's estate. You'll not go near it again. The thief shrugged. It was just a thought, Nom. Kill it, Rallick said. And then Crocus jammed his hands into his pockets. As he walked, his thoughts lost in a maze of dead ends, he frowned with the realization that one of his hands, probing deep in the pocket, had closed around a coin. We know what this coin is, and it really culminates to something interesting with our friend Krupa at the end of the chapter. So he recalled its inexplicable appearance clattering at his feet an instant before the assassin's crossbow quarrel was past, meaning intervention, right? Deus ex machina in a way. The first sight he held up before him displayed the profile of a young man with an amused expression wearing some kind of floppy hat. Tiny rune-like lettering ran around the edge, a language the thief didn't recognize as it was so very different from the cursive Daru script with which he was familiar. And another head as he turns his coin. This one a woman's facing the other way. The etched script here was of a style different from the opposite side, a kind of left slanting hatchwork. The woman looked young, with features similar to the man's. Her expression held nothing of amusement, seeming to the thief's eyes cold and unyielding. We know these twins of chance, Opan. And Crocus heads into this tavern. At a table in a gloomy corner opposite Crocus saw a familiar figure, its hand raised above its head and gesticulating wildly. A grin tugged at the thief's lips, and he strode forward. And this is our buddy, one of my favorite characters, Mr. Krupa, the weirdest dude of this entire bunch. And he's trying to get this turban back for his lovely lady because he violated her. And of course, Krupa still has it. And Crocus obliged and reached for the mug of wine. He leaned back. I was thinking of Orr's estate next, he said casually, his eyes fixed on Krupa. Krupa turned to the coin in his hand again and again. Poorest quality cast, he muttered. Crooked stamping too. Orr's estate, you say? Krupa advises caution. The house is well protected. And he passes this coin back, right? Because we know what Krupa did. He looked up to see Crocus frowning down at his hand. Has something smitten the lad? He asked quickly. Crocus started. He looked away guiltily, the color rising in his face. No, he mumbled. He glanced at his hand again. I must have picked up some wax somewhere. But it will be a fine day for a walk, pronounced Krupa, who is wise in all things. And now we are back with Murillo, and he's entering the round from the third tier road, pausing every now and then to examine a shopkeeper's wares. Is this the shop of Croot of Taliant? I'm Croot, the goldsmith grated sourly, as if disgruntled with his lot in life. And then he enters the shop, and the goldsmith dropped the curtain between two rooms and faced Murillo. Move quickly. I've laid out a hoard of fool's gold and worthless stones on the counter out front. If any sharp-eyed customer marks them, and this hole will be finished. He kicked at the back wall, and a panel swung from its hinges. Crawl through, damn it, and tell Rallick of the guild is not pleased with his generosity regarding our secrets. Go! So Murillo passes through this secret passage, and he meets up with our buddy Rallick. They find themselves in a strange place. In fact, eyes widening, Rallick said, Are you mad? This place is haunted. You mean that's just not a story you assassins made up to keep people away? And frogs croaked and mosquitoes buzzed in the tepid air. Some nights, Rallick said as he brushed dead leaves from one of the benches. Wraiths crowd the entrance. You can walk right up to them. Listen to their pleas and threats. They all want out. And Murillo asks what of Hinter himself? Does his wraith number among them? No. The madman sleeps within, or so it's said. The wraiths are trapped in the sorcerer's nightmares. He holds on to them, and even Hood cannot draw them to his cold bosom. Do you wish to know where those wraiths have come from, Murillo? Rallick grinned. Enter the tower and you'll discover it firsthand. And then Murillo is reporting that he has 2 invitations to Lady Simtal's fate as promised. What was it you said about Crocus making bizarre demands? A peculiar thing that, Murillo mused. When I dropped by the Phoenix Inn this afternoon, Krupa was delivering to the lad the pickings from his last job. Was Murillo has said this. Our young thief is perchance smitten and now keeps her baubles for himself. Of all the hopeless dreams a boy could have, he's reached for the worst. Maybe, Rallick said quietly. Maybe not. A word to his uncle. A nudge in the right direction. Yes, finally, Mamma will be pleased. Patience, Rallick interjected. Turning a thieving child into a man of standing and learning will require more work than a swooning heart will manage. That path to one will be bloody, Rallick said. Don't forget that. But yes, it's been a long time. I wonder if Krupa even remembers such days. All that holds him together is fear of being discovered. Discovered. His friend seemed far away, but then collected himself and smiled. Oh, warn suspicions no more. He's a slippery one, is Krupa. And Kroot will be wanting to close up, the round asleep by now. Right. The 2 men left the terrace, methane mist swirling around their legs. As they reached the path, Murillo turned for a look at the tower's doorway, wondering if he could see the gibbering wraiths, but all he saw beneath the sagging arch was a wall of darkness. In some strange way, he found that more disturbing than any horde of lost souls he might imagine. Now we are back with Baruch. So bright morning sunlight flowed in from the broad windows of Baruch's study, and a warm wind slipped into the room, carrying the smells and noises from the streets below. And he painted wash on the map, covering the areas now held by the Malazan Empire. Fully one half of the map, the north half, was red. A smaller clear strip just south of Black Dog Forest marked Caladan Brood's forces, flanked on either side by 2 smaller patches indicating the Crimson Guard. So what I love about this scene is there's some great symbolism here, right? So we know he's painting on this map indicating areas that are held, right? Just so we can get a visual picture of everything that's going on. But we know that his hands get red at the end of this, and I'll talk about it more when we get there. But it's a great example of how you use objects or set pieces in subtext. But before that happens, the red ink poured across the map when he hears something outside. And it's construction, right? It's kind of funny, right? There's street work going on outside, which is something that we normally are used to in the modern world here. But in fact, I guess those streets have to be made, right? They have to be worked on. The cursing Baruch sat back, his eyes widened as he watched the spreading stain cover Darujistan and continued south to Catlan. So this accident is sort of a portent, let's say, of what is to come as all of this red ink just bleeds across the map. So a crew of workers was busy tearing up the street directly below. And his servant, Roald, shows up. One of your agents has arrived, Lord. And who is it? It is Krupa, who is just going on a walk with Crocus. He studied the man, wondering if he would ever catch a glimpse of what lay beyond Krupa's cherubic demeanor. I wonder that too, because Krupa is a weird dude. I wonder if we're ever going to really get a good glimpse at who this man is, or why he's so different, why he's such a caricature compared to everybody else. But again, the mystery makes him interesting. Like, I don't want to know right now. I think just when he is in scenes, like, he has my attention, right? I'm very engaged when it's interesting, colorful characters like that. But what does he say? Well, Krupa has caught wind of a rumor, an assassin's war, no less. The guild is taking losses, 'tis said. And Baruch knows that Vorkin's guild was strong, but the Empire was stronger, if indeed these newcomers were claws. And something flashed in Krupa's eyes that startled Baruch. The fat man arose in a single fluid motion, which is strange, right? Strange for this guy. Krupa has more to tell, Master Baruch. Krupa can only surmise at best a man of innumerable talents may, in moments of leisure, during games of chance and the like, in the aura of the twins, an adept may hear, see, smell, and touch things as insubstantial as the wind, a taste of lady luck, the bitter warning of the Lord's laughter. Krupa's gaze snapped to the alchemist. Do you follow, master? And of course Baruch knows you speak of Opon. And he discloses who has this coin, that being our buddy Crocus, which we already know, of course. An item, he said softly, his eyes in the disc, that passes without provenance, pursued by many who thirst for its cold kiss, on which life and all that lay within life is often gambled, alone a beggar's crown, in great numbers a king's folly, weighted with ruin, yet blood washes from its beneath its lightest rain, and to the next no hint of its cost. It is as it is, says Krupa, worthless but for those who insist otherwise. You speak, Baruch says slowly, fighting to pull back into reality by focusing on the wax disc in Krupa's hand, of a coin. And this is when we know what Krupa did back at the end to old Crocus. This guy's a slippery little devil. He gestured to the wax disc, and it rose into the air, slowly moving to hover before him at eye level. And this thing just is spinning and spinning and spinning. And he asked, Who carries the coin, Krupa? A lad, he answered casually. Known to Krupa assuredly so, as well as to your other agents, Berylio, Bralic, and Cole. That can't be a coincidence, he hissed. A desperate hope rising struggled against the terror he felt. Opon had entered the gambit, and in such reaches of power the life of the city and those within it meant nothing. He glared at Krupa. Gather the group then, all you've named. They served my interests for a long time, and they must do so now, above all other concerns. Do you understand me? Krupa will convey your insistence. Rallic perchance is bound to guild's duties, while Cole, given purpose in life once again, might well steady his gaze and tread and take this mission to heart. Master Baruch? What is the mission, by the way? Protect the coin bearer. Watch him, mark whose face rests on him, benign or foul. I must know if the lady has him. Oh, Lord! And Krupa, for this, find Rallic. If the Lord claims the coin bearer, the assassin's talents will be required. That means he's got to die if that happens. So this is interesting. Starting to tie back to our buddy Perrin, right? Who has met these meddling twins. So even more threads are coming together. And as the coin spun, thus the city. And I believe we started this sequence of chapters that way. And this is when Baruch raises both palms into view, ready to extend them. He leaned forward on the windowsill. Through a sparkling cloud of dust, Erugistan's rooftop sprawled, and the harbor beyond. And you, Empress, he whispered, I know you're here somewhere. Your pawns move unseen as yet, but I will find them. Be sure of that, with or without Opon's damn luck. So, good chapter. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the restraint on Erikson's part, not revealing all of the plot, right? He's starting to illuminate some things. He's starting to, again, bring threads together, but he's not giving us all the details. So you'll remember I was a little bit disappointed how he handled that in earlier chapters. This chapter was great. Of course, the spy, my favorite scene by far. A beautiful scene, a story that can exist on its own, and really it just reflects how everybody is important in this world, right? They're all living flesh and blood creatures, regardless of if they are heroes or villains in this book. They exist, they are affected, they have lives, sorrows, and I appreciate that, right? I feel like those kinds of scenes are very welcomed in books like these. So next week, let us move on to book 3, the mission, and presumably that's when we're going to find out what's going on. I don't know yet, but let's do chapter 8. It's a short one, but But chapter 9 is really damn long. It's like 2 hours long, or twice as long as this last one went over. So let's just make it easy. Go with chapter 8. Thanks for hanging out with me, guys. Hope you're enjoying the read-along book club of Steven Erikson's Gardens of the Moon. Don't forget, we have a Discord. If you want to chat with us all about this book and all the others we're reading, come stop by. It's free. Links in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week with chapter 8 of Gardens of the Moon.